we do in translation, it's not always about translating the words, it's translating the way things are said. So if you do a direct translation all the time, it's going to be very, from Japanese to English in any case, extremely wordy, and it'll sound very quaint, and it'll sound maybe childlike in some cases, because the conventions of literature in Japanese are so different to what they are in English.
Hi, Alison. Welcome to this Zoom call with the North Little Rock Public Library. We're glad that you were able to be with us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be speaking in your library. It's a great honor.
It's very exciting for us too. It's been a while since we've been able to do something like this. So, bear with us a little bit if this is a little rough. But anyway, let's get started with our interview questions. First off, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are, and what made you want to learn Japanese in order to, get to what you're doing now?
Right. Well, it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try and keep it short. So, as you know, I'm living here in Australia, but I've just been back here for 18 months now. I lived in Japan for 35 years. At university, I studied English literature, majored in English language and literature, and also studied Chinese. I never had any plans to be a Japanese translator, but I ended up going to Japan to teach and marrying a Japanese man. And that was when I thought that I'd better apply myself to learning Japanese so that I could live there. And in the course of learning, I started working at a factory, a Hitachi factory that makes elevators, and I sort of got into translating, and I discovered translation as an occupation, and I felt like this is it. This is the job that I was meant to do. So I was a commercial translator for many years, but as an English lit major, literature was my first love. So there came a point when I thought, I want to do the thing I love most, and I started moving into literary translation. So yes, basically, I learned Japanese out of necessity, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. So your bio says that you were inspired to become a book translator by reading the travel memoir, which I don't know whether you get to give the books their new titles in English, but it's called Tao on the Road and on the Run in Outlaw China. So what was that process like of deciding that you wanted to translate that book and then getting hired to do it?
Well, that book, I read in the magazine about the author and about her adventures in China and Tibet, and I was absolutely fascinated. So I tracked down that book and eventually found it, and I started reading it in Japanese. And at the time, my Japanese was still not good enough. And I kept thinking, I really want to read this in English. And I was sure that somebody was going to translate it into English. That book really spoke to me because I had been in China and Tibet at around the time of Tiananmen, and in a lot of ways reflected the author's experiences. So that was why it was so interesting to me. So I waited for years and years for this book to come out in English, and in the meantime, I was studying Japanese, and I did a master's in Japanese. And as part of my master's, I tried translating a little bit of the book, got some feedback from my teachers. And then after that, I thought, oh, well, it's still not in English. Maybe I'll have a go at doing it. So I contacted the author and asked for her permission to translate it. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. Yes, we had plans, but the translator got sick. So can you do it? And I'm like, oh, okay. So I had no idea what to do. I just picked up the phone and I started ringing around literary agencies and asking, can you be the agent for this book? The first one, by coincidence, said, oh, yes, we'll do it. They knew the book because it had already been translated into Spanish, actually, and it had won a prize. So they took it on, and then about a year later, I received an offer from the English publisher to translate the book into English. So that was how it came about. But yes.
So when you're hired to translate a book after this first one, what does that process look like? Do you pick a book that you want to translate, or does somebody come to you and say, would you like to translate this book? And then, um, you know, then what does the process look like of getting started with that translation?
Um, yes, well, it was actually a long time before I translated a second book, but when that happened, it's it's a mixture of both. Sometimes you find a book that you really want to translate, and you do all the work to prepare materials to bring it to the attention of publishers. Sometimes literary agents will come to me with books that they want to sell the rights to overseas publishers. So they ask me to prepare sample translations and synopses. And sometimes an editor for an overseas publisher who has bought the English rights to a book will approach me and say, hey, are you interested in translating this book? So now that I have a bit of experience behind me, it's sort of a mixture of all three of those means to translating a book.
That's nice. When you're doing your translation, how much contact do you have with the authors of the books?
Well, it varies a lot, case by case, as they say in Japan. The general norm in Japan is for publishers to fiercely protect their authors and not allow any direct contact with them. The very first novel that I translated was Sweet Bean Paste by Jurian Skegawa. And that was a fantastic process. If I have that book here, if anyone hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. It's set in an area of Tokyo, and Jurian was extremely helpful in explaining to me the history, the background about that novel. Any questions I had, he asked. He answered very carefully. So it was a wonderful experience translating that book. I assumed it would be the same for all the others, but it wasn't. With some books, I wasn't allowed any contact with the author. Some books I would have contact through the agent. I would write written questions, and some books I haven't had none. So yeah, it varies. But it certainly is really good to be able to have direct contact with the author and ask them things when you need to.
So what about the editors who are going to be publishing the translations that you work on? It would seem likely that a lot of them wouldn't have any familiarity or limited familiarity with the original language of the work. So do they get any sort of editorial input, or you know, what is that
Yeah.
like?
Well, of course, their job is to produce a book that's going to sell in English. And so they're concerned with getting the best possible manuscript. And they will ask all kinds of things like, can we cut this? Can we change this? Can we do this or that? And so I've always feel like I'm there as the bridge between the author's words and their words in English. And I feel like it's my job to defend, excuse me, the author's intention and what they wanted to say. But also, I'm very much on the side of the editor because I want the book to be presented in the best possible light. So, my an editor will often say, "Hey, could we change the order of this or swap things around?" They'll ask if we can have different words or phrases. That's fine if it's reflecting truly uh, the the author's intentions. But sometimes I think it. it goes too far. So I put my foot down. Yeah. So I'm always judging case by case.
It's really interesting. That was a question that was submitted by one of my coworkers, and it's something I hadn't really thought about with translation before. So, what about when you're translating and there's no real direct translation available in English?
Hmm.
Do you have any, do you have like a way that you like to deal with that? Do you prefer to go more with a direct translation versus sort of translating maybe a cultural concept into a more English one? And are there any examples that you can think of times when you've had to make decisions like that as a translator?
I would say that there are, that happens a lot of the time. And I think what we do in translation, it's not always about translating the words, it's translating the way things are said. So if you do a direct translation all the time, it's going to be very, from Japanese to English in any case, extremely wordy, and it'll sound very quaint, and it'll sound maybe childlike in some cases, because the conventions of literature in Japanese are so different to what they are in English. So in a sense, I'm translating not just the words, but the idea, the story, and trying to give the reader in English the same experience as what the reader in Japanese has. So often I think of it as translating not words, but translating the way we say things. And one very basic example, I guess, in Japanese, there are a lot of honorifics, the set phrases. One that always stumps me is yoroshiku onegai shimasu. In Japanese, it means I'm asking, thank you in advance for your favors. So we use it very much on a daily basis in lots of situations. For example, at the beginning of this interview, when we were just chatting, I would have said to you, yoroshiku onegai shimasu, if this was in Japanese. So, because, you're thanking someone in advance for what they're going to do to help you. Or if you're asking someone for a favor, can you help me with this or that? And you'll say yoroshiku onegai shimasu. But it's a very it's not a highly polite thing. It's very much used in daily situations all the time, but there is no direct equivalent in English for that. So I'm always, scratching my head. What can I say in this situation? Okay, we'll see you later then. Okay, thanks, or thanks in advance if it's in a letter, or great. See things like that, small phrases.
Yeah, thinking about it, thanks in advance, I think maybe has a little bit of different connotation in English than what you're
Yeah,
describing. It's a little bit more passive aggressive.
yeah. It's and a bit more formal, and
Yeah.
yeah. So that's just one small example. But my basic strategy is to always think, okay, in this situation, what would we say in English? So that's how kind of my starting point.
Mhm. So we're here today specifically because our library is doing the One Community, One Book program, and the book that we selected to focus on is What You Are Looking For Is in the Library, by Michiko Aoyama. Is that how you would say that?
Yes, Michiko Aoyama, yeah.
And I like Japanese because the vowels are the same as in Spanish, which is the language that I know. But um, let's talk a little bit about that. So, if you can remember it all, do you know what was your impression of that book when you read it first?
Um, I remember thinking, and then, yes. I think the same as everybody else. gradually, the deeper you get into the book, you see how all the strands start to connect up and thinking, oh, wow, this is really clever. This is a great book. And then feeling very moved with the stories of with certain characters in particular. And then, I like this. And yeah, so it was a long time ago, but yeah, I think basically my impression was the same as what readers in English have, I hope.
Well, do you remember whether this was a book that you was brought to you or something that you read initially before being hired to translate it?
This was a book that a literary agent actually asked me to prepare the materials for. So that was how it came to my notice. And then they successfully sold the English rights. And then the publisher approached me to translate it.
Mm-hmm. So did you have a lot of experience with libraries before you started working on translating this book?
Well, as a user, I grew up in a very small country town in Australia, and for me, going to the library on Saturday mornings was the highlight of my week. We had a very small one-room library, and I would go there on Saturday mornings with my mum and borrow books, and that was just the best thing ever. I didn't like sport, so if you don't like sport in a country town, you're in trouble. There's not much else to do. Uh, Nowadays, that library has grown to become perhaps a bit like yours, the center of the town. There is only one library, and they have a gallery and they have all kinds of um, computers and things there that we never used to have. But they still have the same librarian. That's incredible, at least 50 years later. So,
Wow.
yeah. Also in Tokaimura, where I lived in Japan for 30 years. So Tokai is about 100 kilometers north of Tokyo on the Pacific coast. It's a town of about 35,000. We have a library there. That library was, I would say the library was the center of town. It's where um, people went on the weekends, dads with their kids. It had English language materials. It had a collection of sweet potato materials because Torquay was a town with a lot of sweet potato farmers. Um, when in 2011, you might remember we had the triple disasters of the tsunami, earthquake, and nuclear disasters. The library was closed for 6 months, and it was just
Oh,
awful. It was terrible. It's like the heart had been taken out of our town. So,
yeah.
yeah, I do think libraries are really crucial.
So did anything about this book change how you were thinking about libraries?
Um, I think maybe it's not changed, but it made me think consciously for the first time ever the roles that libraries actually do play. I guess I had taken for granted up until then what libraries are and what they mean to our lives. And so I think, yeah, for the first time I started thinking, oh, okay, the role of libraries in my life and realizing, yeah, how important they'd been.
Mhm. So I have another question here that was submitted by someone who wants to know, as an interpreter, she often hears people confusing what she does for translation. So can you talk about your experience translating this book and how it would differ from what people think as interpretation?
Okay, so let me start with the latter question first. Uh, it drives me nuts. They are not the same thing. And translators and interpreters do completely different jobs. And as a translator, I'm always grinding my teeth too when I hear them being used interchangeably. The basic difference is that interpreters interpret the spoken word and translators work from the written word. And they're entirely different skill sets. I take my hat off to interpreters. They have to be able to come up with the right word on the spot instantly. They have to be able to make decisions as to, what they're going to leave out, what the important thing is, all kinds of very fast-moving processes that I can't do. Sometimes I would do volunteering interpreting for community things, but I would never take money for doing interpreting. Translation, on the other hand, well, when you're translating the written word, it's going to be in print, it's going to be there forever. So you have to make sure that everything is perfect. You have to have as far as you can do. It also requires not just a knowledge of the source language and the target language. To be a literary translator in particular, you also have to be good at writing in English. It's not just translating the words, but actually writing English. So that's another skill set that's perhaps not required in interpreting. And as to the first part of the question about my experience of translating this book, I had a wonderful time. I loved translating this book because it's a book about books, about discovering books. And through translating this book, I discovered some and rediscovered others. As you will recall, each section features a different book. So the first one was Gris and Gras, about the two little mice. I remembered reading that book to my own children when they were young. So that was lovely to rediscover that one. Then there were some other books, but ones in particular that stand out. In chapter 4, I think if you remember, chapter 4 is about Hiroya, the young guy who's the artist, and Ms. Komachi introduces him to a book about evolution by a photographer called Robert Clark. And, I thought that was very interesting. That was a very difficult challenge too, because the book that Ms. Komachi was introducing to Hiroya was actually a translation of the book in English. So it had been translated into Japanese. And the physical description of the book was completely opposite to what it was in English. So it was talking about a beautiful white cover and this and that. And in Japanese, it was black, or I can't remember if it's the other opposite way around. But anyway, it was completely different. So I had this dilemma. Should I describe the book as it is in English, a language publication, or as it's presented in Japanese language? I can't remember now what I went with. But one thing, that book was by a photographer called Robert Clark, and I realized that I had been looking at his work for many years because in my room I had this copy of National Geographic on my bookshelf, which was printed in 2002, and I'd always kept it because I loved the photograph, the cover photograph. And this photographer is the same photographer that of the evolution book that Ms. Komachi introduces to Hiroya. So.
Wow.
Yeah,
It says the evolution of dogs on there.
Yeah, it does. So yeah, I'm a big dog fan. So, and I love that photograph. Yeah, there were other ones, other lovely discoveries. For example, in the last chapter, I loved translating the last chapter about Masao, the retiree who discovers poetry. And in that book, in that section, the last book was this one. This is the actual book that he discovers and
Wow.
and starts transcribing the poems. So Genge to Kaeru. So this is by a very famous poet. He's known as the frog poet in Japanese in Japan. And I hadn't seen this book before, so I bought it and looked through it, and I adore it. So that was just a lovely discovery to make through translating Michiko's book and translating the poetry as well. Then there was another one, Osamu Tezuka, the Firebird, or So I happen to have, my husband had this one on his shelf. So it's a very, very old one. And I'd never really looked at it before. I just, so many manga books, but this is a very old classic one. And as I started looking at it, and really, I realized how spectacular it was, and what an art that is, writing and drawing these types of books. So that was just also a lovely discovery for me. So I guess you could say that the process of translating what you're looking for in the library was a process of discovery for me about all sort of corners of Japanese literature that I hadn't looked into with any depth before. I also felt very close to each of those characters. When I translated them, I tried to give them each their own voice. I concentrated very much on the different voices for those characters, and I would do things like, I watch American TV programs and what's kind of language are young people using, and the older people, I'd try and have someone in mind to think, I'd have a language model for each of those different characters. The one that I liked the most, I think you could say, was Hiroya, the young man. I felt a lot of sympathy for him. I felt like I wanted to help him, like he'd lost confidence. He had this thing that he loved doing, but it sort of lost his way, and it was like, I felt like giving him a little pat on the bottom, come on, Hiroya, and cheering him on. And I could just picture him, wandering around, sort of lost in his own world, and the hero of his own manga. So when I created his voice, that's what I tried to bring out. And yeah, and I was so invested in him, I guess you could say. It made me personally feel happy to get to the end of the book, and you see like Hiroya coming out of his shell and coming in and finding his way in life again. So yeah, I think it's a really wonderful book because it shows people at different stages of their working life. I think it has something for everybody in it. You have a young person just starting out in their work and wondering if that's the right thing for them, and someone else who's like Hiroya, who's lost his way, and a mother who's been sidelined after maternity leave, and another young man who's sort of mid-career but still has this dream that they want to achieve of opening his own antique shop, and then finally Masao at the end of his working life. So I think Michiko's done a really wonderful job of sort of choosing people and building their characters and showing the dilemmas that possibly we all experience at different stages of our lives. So yeah, it was a great joy to translate this book.
Well, I thought it might be fun to do a little bit of a lightning round of questions, just answers right
Okay.
off the top of your head.
All
So,
right.
um, so first one is tea or coffee?
Tea. No hesitation. Tea. I'm a big tea drinker. I love my tea.
Favorite place to go on vacation?
The mountains.
There in Australia or just anywhere?
I guess it was funny when you said that. I see, I lived in Japan for 35 years, and that's, more than half my life.
Mhm.
And when I was there, it was the mountains. I loved the mountains. But back here now, it's not the mountains. Now it's the beach, I would say. But, but still, it's the mountains that springs to my mind, first of all, because I really miss them.
Would you rather have the power of super strength or invisibility?
Invisibility.
What would you do with it?
Yeah.
Um, well, we already know the answer to this one, but cats or dogs?
Dogs, definitely dogs.
You have a dog?
Yes, I have a little poodle that she's 14 years old. I'd show you to her now, but she's at the vet's.
Oh,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
She We brought her over from Japan, so she's been
Uh-huh.
been quite hard for her.
And what time of day are you most productive?
Morning, early morning. I generally my body clock moves with the sun, so um, I get up as soon as the sun's up, or sometimes I have to set the alarm if it's winter and it's too getting light too late. But yeah, I like to work first thing in the morning, and then by lunchtime, my brain is fairly sort of fizzled out. I'll do other more rote things after lunch.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh, it's not. All right, it's not. That's a question of opinion, I think. And I certainly I've eaten some things weird to me in other countries, but I would say the thing that people most go ugh and think is weird when I tell them, and it's something I used to eat here, is brain sandwiches.
Okay. We might need a little explanation for that one.
Well, lamb's brain sandwiches
Uh-huh.
with walnuts, chopped walnuts.
What
Yeah.
sort of toppings do you put on a lamb's brain sandwich?
It's been boiled and mashed and chop walnuts and put it as a spread in a sandwich. It's
Uh-huh.
very delicious. Yeah.
Fascinating. What's your favorite TV show?
Oh, um, uh, yeah, that's a hard one. I don't think I have a favorite TV show. I mean, I watch the news every day, but I don't really watch a lot of
Hard to call that
TV.
a favorite, right? Especially
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Mhm. Do
yeah. I
you
think
have any tattoos?
no, no.
You never
I'm
know.
Yeah, I know, but that is funny though that you would even ask that. I just think it shows how times have changed. I mean, I'm over 60, and so I've seen it's only in the last 10 years, I guess, that I've seen this kind of tattoos become uh, fairly just ordinary everyday things like
Mhm.
getting your ears pierced or something. It's not, it's not something that was sort of generally acceptable for most of my life. And
Yeah,
especially in Japan, if you have a tattoo in Japan, that's, a sign of belonging to a criminal organization. So I
right.
think the barriers there are only in Japan, just sort of starting to change as regards tattoos for, just general cosmetic purposes. Yeah.
If you could travel back in time, what would you like to see?
Oh, what would I like to see? Uh, oh, I would I would like to see Australia before it was settled, I think. Yeah.
Hmm.
Uh, Before the land was all cleared and the trees and cut down and the forests. I would love to see what it used to look like. In fact, yeah, I do think that every day where I live around this area here, I live at the near some foothills, and you can see that the hills have been raised. And I always think, I wonder what that used to look like when all the forests were still there. So, yeah.
Here's another potentially tricky one, although I don't know. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Um, yeah, that is tricky. I don't know that I've ever had one. certainly never had any posters pinned to my wall. Um,
Well, we'll just say
I, there was a certain,
none.
I really, I don't think I can think of anybody. Sorry.
Well, this one's hopefully a little easier. What's your favorite type of cake?
Uh, the cake that my mother always made for my birthday, it's called Grandma's apple cake.
Oh,
Yeah. In fact, when I got married, I had that as the wedding cake as well. I liked it so much.
well, I hope everyone else enjoyed it too. I bet they did. All right, here's my last one on this list. Would you ever skydive?
No, definitely not. I can think of better ways to get my thrills.
So moving back to my literature related questions, what are you currently reading? Anything interesting?
I'm reading Trust by Hernan Diaz. I think it won the Pulitzer Prize a few years
Oh,
ago.
at least one of our audience members seems to have read that too.
Yeah. Also, Mrs. Dalloway by
Okay.
Virginia Woolf. So this year is the 100th anniversary of Mrs. Dalloway, and I thought that I would reread it because I've just started that one, but I hadn't read it since I was at university, and I have to say it's a real revelation to come back to that book after 40 or so more years, and or realizing now what genius that book is. So yeah, that's a really great experience. I highly recommend it. Um,
Yeah, there are definitely some books that hit different when you come back to them after having more life experience.
yeah, and another one that I read recently because of the anniversary this year is The Great Gatsby, and so
Mhm.
I coming back to read that again after many decades. I could see what a masterpiece that book is. Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, I've been
recommend.
thinking I need to give that one another shot because I read it in high school and it didn't
Yeah,
click with me, but everyone says it's great, so
yeah.
maybe I need to
So
try it again. So
yeah,
you're recommending it too. I guess that's a sign.
yes.
What about this question from MK? Are there any translated books that you would recommend?
Okay, so is it permitted to recommend my own?
Of course.
I did mention this before, but Sweet Bean Paste is the first novel that I translated by Jurian Skigawa. It's also been made into a film, Sweet Bean, and this is a lovely book. Uh, it's very different to what you're looking for is in the library, but I think it's similar in that it's a book that will make you feel good about yourself, and about being in the world. So yeah,
Mhm.
I, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, it's going to be a little tricky to manage this, but did anybody in the audience have any questions that, occurred to you while we've been talking here? I threw this out at them without warning.
Favorite authors in English literature?
Are there,
Her favorite
oh,
authors in
what are your favorite English language authors?
Um, Janet Frame, she's New Zealand author. She's I first read her books at university and I wrote my thesis on them. And she's an extraordinary writer. And I've been so happy to see over the decades that her work has been given more and more attention. I think she's one of only two dead writers to have been published, her work published in the New York Review, I think. Um, yeah, so I highly recommend her. Uh, let's see. I was trying to think. I'm always reading, and I read lots of different books for different purposes. So as a translator, I read a book, and one part of my brain is reading it from a work perspective, like, are there any words in there or any phrases, voices I can use? So there's those books, kinds of books, and I think there are so many writers that their style is just, they have a wonderful style, a wonderful voice. George Saunders, I remember reading George Saunders and Fox 8, absolutely gorgeous story about foxes and written in the voice of foxes, but they sound Shakespearean. So masterful. So I enjoy that kind of thing. But then I also like reading airport thrillers, just to give me a rest, my brain a rest, like, and pace, flip through the pages. So sometimes I just love reading a Harlan Coben book as well. So yeah, I'm not judgmental about books. I'll read anything because I think so many books, every book has something in it, something good or something to be appreciated for.
Yeah. Anyone else?
How long does it take her to work on a book?
How long does it take you to work on a book?
Uh, so it can take up to a year. Uh, I would say as long as the publisher is willing to give you, like the longer you get, the better. Um, because like writing, it needs time to simmer, and especially with Japanese to English, the two languages are so far apart. I find that I will translate a first draft or a second draft into English, and then when I go back and look at it, it's so stilted and unnatural and it just doesn't read well in English. So you really need time to be able to pass so that you can have a distance in your mind from what you've written first and go back and look at it again objectively. So if forced to, I could work really fast, but I can't guarantee that that will produce the best possible translation.
All right.
Does she have any translations coming out soon?
You have anticipated my. Anyone else before we get to that one? All right, well, why don't you share with us what, is there something that you're working on right now that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I'm not working on, but a book that has just been released in June is this one. It's called Liu, Live, Love, Die in the Shadow of the Dragon. And this is a wonderful book, I have to say. It's very different from any of my others. And it's by an author, Akira Higashiyama, who's Taiwanese. He was born in Taiwan and basically grew up in Japan, but has spent his whole life going between Taiwan and Japan. And this story it's sort of a ghost story. It's a thriller. It's a crime. It's a coming of age. It's a really fun story, but it's set in Taiwan and China. And in the course of reading that, you kind of get a better idea about the relationship, the very tricky and difficult historical relationship between Taiwan and China. And I'm feeling a bit protective of this book because it was published by a very tiny independent publisher from Italy called 26 Letters. And they're a successful independent publisher in Italy. But then the publisher decided to set up in the US as well. So I think this is their first translated book that was published in the US. And being a small independent publisher, they don't have the same resources as Penguin or Doubleday or Simon and Schuster and all those other big houses have. So they don't have the same kind of money for PR and promotion, which a huge part of how books come to our notice. So this one you won't probably find in a lot of big bookshops. I think it is in Barnes and Noble and it's on Amazon, but certainly it's not in the bookshops over here in Australia, which is a big disappointment to me.
Yeah.
But it is a fantastic book. It won a major literary prize in Japan. So yeah, I do highly recommend that, if possible. So yeah.
Yeah. Have to see if we can get one.
Oh, thank you. Spread the word. And I have to say also that I don't usually do publicity for the books I translate. I feel like the publishers have a budget, but this book just needs a little bit of an extra push, just like Hiroya in what you're looking for in the library.
Right. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Alison. We, really appreciate it and learned some fascinating things today. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Megan. It really was a pleasure to come here, and I'm thrilled to be in your library today. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
All right.